Alright, so welcome to this episode of Aussie English, guys. This is the first of many episodes, hopefully, to help you guys with IELTS. So we're going to hopefully use a lot of different vocabulary, a lot of different expressions, and talk about our families in this episode. So there's going to be this free video and podcast episode that'll go up obviously on the podcast and on YouTube, but then there will also be a breakdown of the different expressions, collocations, the more advanced English used in this episode for anyone in the Aussie English classroom. So remember, guys, you can sign up down below here, click theaussieenglishclassroom.com, go and check it out.
Before we get into it, so let's just get through what the speaking test is on IELTS. So the speaking test has 3 parts, and the first one they're gonna ask you, so you have an examiner in front of you just talking to you normally as we're doing now, and the first thing they're gonna ask you is to introduce yourself. So you might have to explain what you're doing in Australia, where you're from, things like that. Just a small talk, and it's not a big deal. Like, that's a normal conversation you'll have with your friends, for example. The second part is about a specific topic, like family and family things, like we're gonna do today. So they might ask you about, I don't know, a holiday that you really enjoyed with your family, or who you love the most in your family, things like that. And the third part is about the same topic, but they're gonna ask further questions. For example, if the topic is family, they might ask you to explain how families are structured in your country, for example, or if you're from a very traditional family or not. So just further questions about the same topic, and they'll be judging your vocabulary, your pronunciation, your fluency, and your grammatical range. So just talk as much as you can, show that you have vocabulary, that you know how to use different sentences, different verbs and synonyms, and yeah, that's pretty much what I would do.
So be as descriptive as possible, go into as much detail as possible, and talk for as long as possible. If they say to you, who's in your family, don't just say me, my dad, and my mum.
And another thing is, like, be relaxed. Like, what happened to me was I was really confident for my test, but I didn't talk as much as I know I could, and you know, at the end I got really nervous because I knew that I would, you know, I can do better, but it was just like, okay, my mark wasn't bad, but I know that maybe next time I'll do much better, because they just want you to talk and communicate as much as you can.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So do you want to get into it just before we go through any of this, talking about your family? So, you know, imagine we're in one of these IELTS exams and I say, you know, can you introduce yourself and can you tell me about your family?
Okay, so I'm Raquel. I'm from Brazil, where families are very important. I think that's a similar thing to Australia, right?
I think it's a similar thing everywhere, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but like we do have this. Families are really, really important, and most families are quite traditional. So you have the nuclear family, your dad, your sisters, or your siblings, and you also have your extended family very close to you. So in my case, I was living with my grandmother, my aunts and uncles, as well as my mom and my sister. My parents got divorced when I was around 6, so that was a bit, you know, unusual, different from most families in Brazil. But yeah, that's I have a really big family. We are not in contact with every single person, obviously, but you are a big family. Either like both sides, like my mom's family is quite, you know, extensive, and my dad's family is really, really big as well. And it's impossible for me to remember every single person to talk about them because there's just too many people. But yeah, that's pretty much.
I'm sure I can relate to that with regards to big families. Yeah. So who were you closest to in your family?
Probably, I'm really close to my sister from my parents, you know, my mom's first marriage, I would say. With
your father. You guys, do you want to describe that? You guys have, like, you've got 2 siblings from the same parents?
And 2 other ones from my father's second marriage. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And they are? half siblings?
Yes, half siblings.
Exactly. So you have a half sister and a half brother?
Yes. I'm the closest to my sister, I would say.
Yeah.
And also my mom, like, because we were living together when my parents got divorced, I stayed with my mom. So I can say, okay, we're kind of close, but to be honest, I would just, mention my sister. We are very different from each other. Like, she's so much more organized. I'm always talking about her. But yeah, my sister is my best friend. And my other siblings are really close to me as well. Like, my Gabriela, she's like 19, so
Yep.
she's, starting her life as a young adult, and I kind of feel like, oh my gosh, so worried, so concerned about her. But yeah.
Awesome. And what about your grandparents on either side of your family? Did you have a close relationship with your grandparents when growing up?
It's funny because I didn't meet my father's dad, my mom's dad. I met my father's dad, my grandpa, but he died a few years ago, and we were not that close anyway. Like, he was a bit, quiet, and he wouldn't talk much with the kids, so we didn't develop any relationship.
You didn't have a close relationship.
Yes. But I didn't meet my mom's father, but I'm really, really close to my grandmother, both my grandmothers. They're just very different women, but they're really, really good people. My mom's mother she raised me. Like, when I think about my upbringing, everything, my values I got from her. She's a very strict woman, very traditional, quite religious, Catholic. Yeah. So, but just that's her generation. And my other grandmother, she's quite religious as well, but she's not as emotional as the other one. Like, she's the kind of person who makes sure you have eaten, you have everything you need, but she's not warm and like really affectionate.
Yeah.
So they're very different, like very different personalities.
Awesome.
What about your grandparents? We visited them.
Well, I can talk about my family, and we can switch the roles now, where you can be the one asking me questions and I can answer them.
So like, how does it feel to have your grandparents are in the 90s, right? And we visited them the other day, and it was mind blowing. Just like, they were asking about the internet and things like that. And it just got both of us really thinking about how life goes so quickly, and I don't have this sort of relationship with my grandparents. Yeah. So how is it for you?
It's pretty good. I guess before we get into that, though, I can give you a sort of summary of my entire family. So I grew up with my one sister. I have a full sister, and my parents have been married the entire time, obviously, and so I was born in Ferntree Gully on the other side of Melbourne here in Victoria in Australia, and grew up there for 9 years, first 9 years of my life, and then we moved down here to where we are now, which is Ocean Grove, about 2 hours away from where I grew up in Ferntree Gully. And so I have my parents. They were both really loving. My dad was he was probably the stricter of the two. So mum was always really loving and caring and would let me get away with murder. I think she would let me do whatever I wanted, whereas dad was a lot stricter, and he would let you, he would have you on a tight leash, I think is a good way of explaining it, where you could do what you wanted, but within limits and within control. Yeah. And so I think it was a pretty fun and enjoyable upbringing for sure. Especially, we were talking the other day about living in Ocean Grove and what it was like, and how it differed between your upbringing in Brazil and mine here. And we used to have free roam of the streets when I was probably maybe 12 years old. My parents would let me go out by myself and hang out with my friends in the street, and Kel was like, how did you know when to come home?
That's so different from me. I couldn't do that. Like, even like being a teenager, I remember I would go to school, come back home, and that was it. Like, there was no, okay, you're allowed to go out for a party or something. Not just because you might be dangerous, but like, my family was really strict. Yeah. We didn't have the freedom he had, for example.
No boys, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes, Exactly. Although I had most of those, but the boys and girls wasn't as specified as the drugs and cigarettes.
My grandma was the kind of, she is, thank God she's alive, but like, she would say, you should not go to your friend's house because, you know, the parents might get annoyed at you and you don't want them to be talking about you, or everyone's gonna know that you know, an annoying kid or something. So it's like, okay.
But you were, right?
I was.
But everyone will know.
Yeah. But anyway, that was pretty much like very different. Like I remember you saying that, yeah, I would just go back home once the lights were...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they would let me out. I would play skateboard, ride my bike around, you know, fall off that, and play ball games quite a lot, kicking the ball around, playing soccer, footy, and my parents would just say, when the street lights come on, just come home. And so you knew that they would have an eye outside and be keeping an eye on the street lights, and if they came on and I wasn't home quick enough, then they would come out and find me, and I'd usually be in trouble. So that was pretty good. My upbringing was pretty good here. My sister and I never had a really close relationship.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about sibling rivalry.
So compared to you and your sister have this incredibly strong connection, and I think we've spoken about it where I think potentially your parents' divorce led to you two being incredibly close, which may have happened in my case had that happened in my family.
Yes.
But because it didn't happen, my sister and I were always competing for attention, resources, probably praise. You know, I got this on a test. What did he get? Blah, blah, blah. And so until more recently, like probably more recent years, maybe the last 5 years, me and my sister and I did not have a close relationship, and I would probably say we really disliked each other, you know, in our teen years.
She's so lovely.
She's now.
She's so lovely. I'm always like, what are you talking about? She's amazing.
She's lovely now. She's lovely now, and that's why we're close. We're close now. We see each other.
It's
but yeah,
funny how things, you know, turn out differently. Like for me, having my parents divorced at such a young age, I didn't have the emotional security from them you know, when I was little, and I had to have someone. So my sister and I, we became really close and best friends. We would take care of each other, do everything together. Of course, you had, you know, fights and rivalry every now and then, but overall it was just like love, and we always, you know, we've always been friends, and that's so interesting.
But back onto the grandparents. So I never knew my dad's father. He died from lung cancer from smoking before I was born. I knew my grandmother, his mother, but she died from brain cancer when I was 12 from smoking as well. They smoked a lot, and that obviously led to these cancers. So that was pretty sad growing up. I remember that was the first big death in the family, was my grandmother passing away. And at the time it was really kind of upsetting because I was very close with her, but not close with my mother's parents very much, because they were a lot different. My mother's parents were very strict, kind of upper class, proper people who said grace before dinner. They were religious too, and very rigid, very straight, very organised, and I don't know, proper. Proper is probably the best way of doing it. Whereas my grandmother, having her husband who had passed away maybe a decade before, she was always like, we would go to her house and she would do everything for us.
Nice.
And it would be all about us. It would be like, what do you want to do? Do you want to play games? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to do this? Whereas going to my mother's parents' house, it would always be like, this is what we're doing.
Yes,
this is what we're going to be eating, where we're going. And it was more about what they wanted to do and fitting us in.
Okay.
So yeah, but in more recent years, having obviously grown up a bit myself, I've gotten to know my grandparents a lot more, and we have a closer relationship now. My mother's parents, who are both still alive, and I think 85 and 87, although they tend to not talk about their age very often.
It's funny, like we went there and I felt this generation gap, like just how, you know, just different things are and the world changes around you, just getting older and talking to them, just like, what about this person? And they like, we don't know who those people were, just like
their parents.
Yes,
they were talking about my great-grandparents.
So really interesting.
Exactly. Awesome. And I guess what else should we chat about with regards to discussing family? So that's probably a good start to how the IELTS discussion would go. It may not go as long as that.
No, probably not, but keep in mind that you have to talk more than the examiner. So if you're talking, that's awesome. If the other person needs to keep pushing you, that's not a good sign. Something that might be interesting to mention is that some people are only childs, right?
Children.
Yeah. See, so they might have a completely different structure from our families. Like I have siblings, you have a sister.
Yeah.
So if they ask you like talk about your siblings or whatever, just say, yeah, I'm an only child, and that's my parents decided not to have another baby, so things like that. It might change depending on your family
I think
structure.
a good thing to think about too is just when they obviously ask you to start talking about your family, pick one person, begin with them, and then just go through the people, So obviously you'll be starting with yourself. When you introduce yourself, you can talk about your history, where you're from, and then you can just go, okay, my father, blah, my mother, blah, my siblings, my brother, my sister, my half-sister, my half-brother, you can talk about those relationships, and then go on to grandparents.
Yes.
So just think, I guess preparing, you could list all the people you could potentially talk about, and I'm sure the examiner won't give you enough time to go through all of them in your family, right? So as long as you switch between them, and then you're going to end up with this chain of thoughts that ends up in a sort of discussion.
And they might be really specific as well. So we were saying talk about your family, but they might ask you something really like tell me more about your mother, or what values do you get from your mother, things like that. So that's when you have to be quite specific and just talk about this one person, because if you keep changing, they might think, oh, you're not fully responding to the question.
Oh, brilliant. All right, guys, we might finish up here for the free content. So this is going to be on the podcast, obviously, and it's going to be on the YouTube channel. Make sure that if you would like all of the bonus content for this episode today, where we're going to break down more of these expressions, collocations, and hopefully give you more tools for describing your family and doing better on IELTS, make sure that you go to theaussieenglishclassroom.com and sign up. The link will be below. See you there.